You're listening to the VTZone.com's weekly Scoutcast. Everything Hokies. And now here's publisher Jason Stamm.
Welcome to another edition of the VTZone.com's weekly Scoutcast. I am publisher Jason Stamm. We are a week away from National Signing Day now. We've held off our podcast a little bit, which I'm glad we did because we've got a lot more to talk about with a few of the things happened the last couple of days. But my main man, Doug Bowman, is here to help me break everything down. Doug, how's everything going in Rich Vegas?
Going well, just here. Busy last couple of days here in the world of Virginia Tech.
No Fetty Wap concert for you, though, this week?
No Fetty Wap this week.
We're back to the grind, I guess, now, right?
Yeah. You can't be going to a Sunday night Fetty Wap every week.
Right, yeah. And, you can't overdo it. I mean, you just want to kind of, make it a special occasion and throw it in every now and then.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned it, Doug. It has been a very eventful last few days for Virginia Tech in a number of ways. I'll be honest, I think we should start out talking about recruiting because that's been, we're now, like I said, we're a week away from National Signing Day. And I do want to go ahead and talk about, I'm going to mention on the board here, I don't think I've posted anything yet, but we're going to be doing what I've done every year now. It's the fifth year. I'll be up bright and early, 6 a.m. We'll have all kinds of coverage with the, live chat throughout the morning as all these guys, their letters of intent are coming in. We'll be keeping up. There's a few guys we'll be waiting on National Signing Day. Not many, but a couple. So we're going to be waiting on those guys to see what they do, and, we'll finish it up. I'm going to make the trip up to Charlottesville that night for Virginia Tech UVA basketball. So busy day, but we got everything covered on the VTZone.com.
Dang,
Doug,
are you going to be awake by the end of that game?
Man, I hope so. I may need a couple of coffee to get home, get back to Blacksburg, but planning on it. That will be a very long day, but that's not even counting they have a press conference in the afternoon. I'll be going to for obviously more coverage from that, and we'll hear from Justin Fuente and kind of get his take on everything. So, and planning on doing a couple of radio spots, maybe even a couple of TV spots in between. So we'll see. We'll see by the end of the day.
Bring the phone charger. Yeah, bring the phone charger.
Well, I do have a charger in my car, so I think that's at least the positive with being such a long day.
You get extra points if you can do a radio spot during the basketball game.
During the game? I don't know. Well, it's an 8 o'clock game. I don't know how many radio spots we'll be doing at night, but
that's true.
I know we get a couple during the day. So, Doug, it was I didn't know what to call it, man. I'll be honest, I think you've been around Virginia Tech recruiting, following it a little bit more longer than I have. Can you remember a more eventful 4-day stretch like they had this past weekend?
Not one that's as impactful as these last ones. I mean, these have all been top kids. I mean, Virginia Tech will go on a little commitment spree in June or July. Every year or two, it seems like they get a bunch of kids to pull the trigger over the summer. But, they go from with the group that they've pulled in over the last 4 days. I mean, that was one per day, one after the other. That's pretty much how you draw it up.
Yeah, I don't think they could have planned it any better. They got, quickly to recap, so we get 5-star Devon Hunter on Friday. I thought we kind of knew that was coming, but it's official, so obviously it looks a little better, sounds a little better, everything you can say. Commitment, Devon Hunter. So Hunter commits on Friday, then we followed it up with, the official visit weekend. So we had a bunch of guys on officials. Or not a bunch of guys. There were, I think, a dozen, I believe, total, counting a lot of the guys who were committed. You get Bryce Watts that commits on Saturday night on his visit. Couldn't even wait to get off the visit to make his commitment. Dylan Rivers, who, we've been talking about Dylan for a long time. He's a guy who Aaron Moorhead recruited when he was a freshman, so Virginia Tech is not something new. They haven't just recently gotten on him. So got him to flip from Penn State. He announced that commitment on Sunday. Sunday afternoon, Robert Porsche IV, son of former Detroit Lions defensive end Robert Porsche, actually committed before he left. We talked about that on our premium board, on our Insider, and then he made it official on Monday. So technically he had 4 recruits in 4 days. I don't know, Doug. I mean, they've met so many needs. They were big-time guys. You know, I think all 4 of them at some point will have a major impact. Obviously, a couple more than the others, but I mean, they really are finishing with a very, very strong flurry, I guess, here right before signing day.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about restocking the cupboard on defense, I mean, you know, going back to Nathan Proctor in early January, I mean, you pick up Proctor and, you know, whether he's going to be a linebacker or defensive end, who knows. And then Porsche on the defensive line as well. And then you get a linebacker and you pick up a kid like Dylan Rivers. And then you get a secondary and you pick up, you know, one of the top safety defensive back guys in the country. I mean, Virginia Tech's been known for Bud Foster's defense for all these years. And then this year it was all about the offense and, you know, how they progress to kind of catch up to the rest of college football. But here we are in January, and, you know, Justin Fuente's kind of given Bud Foster everything he needs to continue to put out those great defenses. So, I mean, I think the two headliners are definitely Hunter and Dylan Rivers. Just, I mean, linebacking. If you look at the depth chart right now, there's just not a lot of behind Matua Block and Edmonds. There's just not a lot of guys that, you know, there's depth, but there's a lot of unproven, you know, redshirt freshmen and freshmen. So anytime you can, you know, get a highly rated guy like Rivers in there to kind of start to compete and maybe be that guy that takes over after Matua Block, I think him and Hunter were obviously the biggest guys.
So let's talk about Hunter, Doug. I mean, obviously he's the headliner, and you know, as far as scout rankings go, scouts rankings. Of course, you know, we've been talking about Rivals rankings forever, but you know, scouts rankings go back just as far as Rivals do to 2002. So, 2002. This is now the 15th class, I believe. If you count back, 15th or 16th class, I guess, counting that 1 year. So, in 16 classes now, Devin Hunter is now the highest ranked commitment they've ever had. I mean, I think he's just higher than Kendall Fuller and Tyrod and Logan Thomas were all 5-star guys. So, you know, I've seen Hunter a couple times. I didn't get a chance to see him in a game setting this year. I saw him in camp and off season. Saw him play grass field last year, and I thought Hunter just had a huge game that game. I mean, to me, this is a kid who, you know, Cam Chancellor has been his like idol. It's been his mentor. Cam was actually there at the announcement. You know, coming out of high school, Cam was pretty scrawny looking. If you go back and look at his photos and look at how he looked, he wasn't anywhere close to what he is now.
He certainly didn't get to take consistent visits to Florida and Auburn and Alabama.
Yeah. So Cam, you know, I guess about 2 years into Virginia Tech, once he got in the weight program, was starting to really fill out and, you know, turn into the guy that we all know now. So, you know, I'll be honest, I think after seeing Hunter, and, you know, as much as I've seen him and I've seen, you know, going back and looking at what Cam did, I would say Hunter is about as good as Cam, like year 3 at Virginia Tech. That's how good Hunter is, that he's already that much farther along than Cam was. Because Cam was turned out to be obviously I don't know if anybody thought he was going to be an all-pro like he is now and Super Bowl champ and everything else, but, you know, he's not that far behind where Cam was that far into it. But just overall, I mean, in your mind, Doug, how big of a get is a kid like Devon Hunter?
I mean, he's huge. It's huge. I mean, you talked about him and where he's rated compared to. I mean, you talked about some of the legends of Virginia Tech, and to get a guy that's rated higher than him. I mean, his film is obviously incredibly impressive, and to fit him in there in a Bud Foster defense, I mean, that's the kind of talent that can take a defense from, you know, a good ACC defense to, you know, a dominant nationally ranked, gives you a chance to get into the playoff kind of defense. I mean, if you watch the Alabamas and the Clemsons and those guys that recruit at a high level every year, I mean, Devin Hunter is the kind of player that they have all over the field. So, I mean, this is one of those recruitments that if you go back through the years, Virginia Tech's been in good shape early with a lot of highly rated guys like Deshaun Hand come to mind.
Josh Sweat.
Josh Sweat was up there. As guys that were Virginia Tech was on early and was in good position, and then as the year goes by, they start to look elsewhere. And we've been talking about Devin Hunter for over a year now, and how the Virginia Tech's been in good shape for him, and then they close the deal on him. So I think he's obviously going to play in the fall. So I guess we get to see what kind of role Bud Foster wants to give him right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they could have done it any better with Hunter. I mean, we've talked about before. I mean, maybe not on Scout here, but I know in our last home we talked about kind of what happened with Sweat, and you can make the case that they probably did exactly what they should not do to try to close there, and it really screwed things up with him. I don't know if they could have played the whole game with Hunter any better. To me, what really set them over the top was when they let him unveil the Bristol jerseys. I don't know. I mean, that's just, if that doesn't show you what a priority, if that didn't, to him didn't show him what a priority he was, I'm not sure what was going to do it. I mean, they didn't do that for anybody else, and I don't know. That was such a big deal that game for him to have that big of a role in it. I thought that was a huge part of it.
Yeah, any time that you can do something in recruiting for a recruit that's never been done before, especially in this day where seemingly everything's been done. I think that's I mean, the players on the team hadn't even seen those jerseys, and so I mean, I think just a great job all around. I mean, obviously Fuente and Bud Foster had a lot to do with it, but I think, I don't think those ideas came necessarily from Foster and Fuente as much as that commitment that Virginia Tech made a couple of years ago to the recruiting staff. And, that's the kind of, people talk about, Alabama and Clemson's recruiting staffs being so huge, but when you have somebody that can focus on that and brainstorm and do all that basically all day, every day, I mean, that's the kind of dividends that they can pay off.
Yeah, and I gave him a shout out to them. I'm going to shout out my guy Thomas Gary again. That was 110% his idea to have Dev unveil the jerseys like that and wear them, and being able to, that's how to break the news on it. So that was completely him. But Hunter, I've got no doubt in my mind he's going to play this year. He's good enough. He could play either safety position or linebacker, but with as many guys that got linebacker now, I don't think they're going to need him at linebacker. So it's just a matter, I guess, is he going to be a free safety? Is he going to be a rover? Either spot, I think he can excel at either one. He's a big safety too, so he's not some little scrawny guy manning the that last line of defense. He's a big kid.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems free safety is such an important position in terms of being the quarterback of the secondary and all that. It seems like for a guy with his kind of athleticism and all that, coming in playing as a true freshman, you kind of want to limit the decisions that he's going to have to make and kind of just let him play as much as possible. So I think rover, but we'll see who gets that free safety spot, whether it's Edmonds or Luke Reynolds or somebody else. I could see him playing rover and nickel as a kind of a tweener there, kind of that third linebacker that's kind of been diminished here over the last few years, just to kind of get them close to the line of scrimmage and let them maybe not have to worry about the number one wide receiver running down the field as opposed to just reacting to the ball.
Yeah, and obviously Hunter is the biggest get. They're not going to top him. Obviously, there's a few more guys out there they could finish up with, but I mean, the other three they got over the weekend, Doug, I mean, we talked about Dylan Rivers a little bit. He's a kid who, I mean, he's so rangy and athletic, and, you know, props to his girlfriend. I know his girlfriend goes to Virginia Tech. She may have had the biggest role of anybody because, if I'm not mistaken, I think his dad played at Penn State, so he would have been a legacy up there. So to get him to switch down to Virginia Tech, being in state, and they were on him, I know his girlfriend played a huge part, but I don't know. They've been working that one so long, and all these kind of under the table visits. He's the one I don't know if you remember, Doug, that I was telling you. He visited for the Georgia Tech game, and you know I know Dylan. I've seen him so many times. He was a freshman. He knows who I am. You know, I was taking pictures of all the guys on the sidelines. He was putting his hand over his face to kind of cover his face for me taking pictures. Yeah. I did get one shot of him going up the stairs. I think I posted when he committed, but. You know, he tried to do so much stuff under the table, and so this has been going on for a long time. But to do that a week and a half before signing day, to flip from where you've been committed for 15 months, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's an incredibly tough decision for a kid to decide to tell these coaches that have put so much effort into him already that you're going to go somewhere else. 2 weeks before signing day, but I think Bud Foster just had a huge role in convincing Rivers over time to make the flip. I mean, I think there was concern about whether Foster and Fuente was going to work out, and then I think the 9-3 season and how smoothly it went and everything. We talked a lot this year about how winning was going to help Virginia Tech with Devin Hunter, but I think winning and kind of proving that the coaching staff that they have in place now works and is going to be there for a while. I think that was, equally as big for getting Rivers to flip over.
So they got Rivers, and then Bryce Watts. I think as a kid, you're probably going to be a redshirt. I think could be an impactful guy another year or two from now. Robert Porcher, I think you got to love his bloodlines. Again, I mentioned his dad, 12-year guy with the Lions, 3-time All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowler. Great bloodlines. I know he's one of those kids that's a great kid off the field, no issues, great academics. So I think up and down, to me, he's a great-looking kid, the one you look for. 6'3", 240, I think is going to be a huge needed addition coming off the line. They added a few DNs, but I'll be honest, I think he may be the best of the group.
He was committed to Nebraska first, right?
Yeah, he committed to Nebraska in June, and then he decommitted in December. He told me he came down to Michigan State and Georgia Tech. He was supposed to go to Georgia Tech this weekend. He canceled that one after Virginia Tech, obviously, and went there. But it kind of came down to those three after Nebraska was done.
Yeah, I mean, those are pretty good programs when you talk about, those aren't chump programs that the kid, all of a sudden in senior year, he was much better than people expected, and that's where the big guys came in. I mean, the big guys have been in on him for months now. So, you talked about the bloodlines, and we've talked on here before about the misses at defensive end and kind of this impending gap that they needed to fill in once guys like Mahota and Trayvon Hill leave. I mean, there's this gap on the depth chart that they needed to really replenish, and it looks like they're going that way.
So they got a couple of really big gets there, and those guys, and still have room left. That's the funny thing, Doug. I mean, they're looking like they're probably going to take a class of about 30 technically. And I know I've been asked a couple of times how they're going to make the numbers work. They always do. You're looking at a couple of guys probably not going to qualify. You're looking at A.J. Bush, who's a JUCO guy who's not going to be technically in this class. And then you got a couple of early enrollees from Fourth Union. So because they prep, they can move their guys, move as far as where they count, what class they count towards. So that would be 5 more. And they're already looking at a full class, but you take those 5 away, meaning they could bring in about 30. So they've got 26 right now. You're looking at 4 more. Taiwan Garbutt obviously is the big get. He's been out there for quite a while. He was committed to Virginia Tech for, 5 months, decommitted in July. Still looking like, I don't know, Doug, I'm not sure what you're hearing, but I would say probably 90% right now for Virginia Tech, maybe 95. I never say 100% until it's a done deal, but very, very, very close right now.
Yeah, there was I don't know what happened, but somehow his original commitment tweet got bumped back to the top of his Twitter feed yesterday or a couple of days ago. And, I forget how many times he visited Virginia Tech over the course of the fall. Wasn't he at the Belk Bowl?
Believe he was, yeah.
Or a couple other games. The guy's been to Virginia, talked so much about getting guys on campus. And, obviously, torn between Pittsburgh and Tech. He's been that way since he committed and since he decommitted. But, he'd just be another huge get. Defensive end prospect, just like Porsche, just the other handful of guys they're going after to kind of replenish that depth chart. But, yeah, he's been a guy it seemed like Virginia Tech was holding off Pittsburgh all year, and now we're getting down to crunch time.
So we got Taiwan Garbutt. We've still got, a few other guys. We've got Mekhi Becton, obviously still is the big target for the offensive line. They wanted to get one offensive lineman. Still, they've already gotten, a couple already. Lasita Smith is going to be an offensive lineman. I know he's looked at. Some people have him listed as a tight end. Some people have him listed as an offensive lineman. He's going to be. They already got Silas Zancy committed. He's enrolled early. Christian Daresall was assigned in place, so he won't be there this year. But they need to get somebody to help him. It's looking like he's going to be the main option. Bryson Speeds is the backup. Then you've got Amir Speed out there still is a good shot at him. Daz Newsome at cornerback. Who am I missing? There's somebody else big.
DeBose.
Yeah, you got Zion DeBose and Victor DiMakiji still on the D line. So, and then with DiMakiji, it was looking like it was going to be down to Duke and Virginia Tech. But hey, teams start scrambling this time of year. Notre Dame just offered him this afternoon. So, I guess we'll wait and see if that has any impact. If they come in a week out, or if he sticks with just Duke and Virginia Tech. So, still a lot that can happen, but we're tracking it all over this last week.
Yeah, he just listed like 6 or 7 guys for a nearly full boat. I laugh every time at the beginning of a cycle when somebody says, Virginia Tech's going to have to take a smaller class than normal after last year's big class, and then you're talking high teens in February, early 20s in June or July, and then by the end of the year, you're up over 25. The numbers just work themselves out, and they'll figure it out. So,
well, and it's crazy too. I don't think they saw Gerard Evans leaving, a year early. At least this point in the summer, you didn't see that happening. And then, you're always going to have some guys that leave, but sometimes you get an inkling. At least these guys are, hey, I'm looking to leave. It didn't look like anybody was set to go a couple months ago. When you're winning, nobody wants to leave. So now that things have cooled down, we're getting into, switching up stuff here. You've had a few that have left. We've documented quite a few of those, but, you had Seth Dooley, Sean McKenzie, Dwayne Johnson, Michael Santa Maria. You had a few guys that have defected now, and that's left some openings. So it always changes. It seems like it always happens this time of year. Like you end up almost always getting a full class.
Yeah, and I guess it probably also has to do a little with Fuente coming in as a new coach. He didn't recruit any of those guys, so those guys stick around for a year, and obviously things were great with them winning, but then end of the year you look in the mirror and playing for a coach that didn't recruit you, and it's not looking like you're going to get on the field. It makes sense to go pursue something else, and I'm sure Fuente's this big class is a part of that, and kind of turning over the roster to Fuente guys basically.
Yeah, and Virginia Tech right now is 16th in team rankings. We'll see where they end up a week from now. There's gonna be a lot of movement. A lot of teams still adding spots, so we'll see where they end up. But we'll be interested to follow for sure. We'll have all kinds of coverage over the next week, so we will not leave you out in the cold on what's going on. But Doug, one reason I'm kind of glad we talked about earlier too, waiting until Wednesday releasing our podcast this week so we can talk about the 2017 schedule for football is going to release. And I mean, we already knew a couple of these. We knew the opponents, but now we know the dates. And I don't know. I know you're going to go into more detail in a story you got cooking right now. But what's kind of your initial impression of the schedule?
The number one thing is 6 Saturday home games. We've talked about it the last 2 years, 2 years ago, Virginia Tech got screwed with a Friday night game, a pouring down rain nooner against Pittsburgh, and then the UVA game, after Thanksgiving. I mean, there's just not that many Saturday recruiting weekends to get. When you play a Thursday night game or a Friday night game, nobody can visit. And I think this year Virginia Tech went from September 24th, which was the ECU game, to November 12th, which was the Georgia Tech game, without a Saturday game. And they went 6 weeks without having the opportunity to, host a bunch of guys on campus for a game. And, I think losing a month and a half while they're visiting elsewhere is huge for recruiting. So all the home games are on Saturdays. I think they got a couple prime opportunities to get a boatload of highly rated guys on campus, Clemson and North Carolina in particular. Clemson obviously is going to be the huge one on September 30th. But I mean, just jumping out at me immediately is just, Thursday night games, Virginia Tech obviously has a great reputation. That's been a big part of the program over the last 10 years. But I mean, when you're trying to recruit with the big boys and you're losing, a marquee game. I mean, Miami could have been a marquee game on Saturday this year, but it was a Thursday night and they couldn't get anybody up for it. So I think I won't be surprised to see Virginia Tech play Thursday night games in the future, but I think the ideal way to do it, for recruiting purposes at least, is to get the 6 home games.
I'm with you. Well, and to me, the other thing that I thought really stood out was that Clemson turns out to be the ACC opener, and the timing of it into September. You're getting into fall. The weather's not nasty yet. I mean, it should be. There's no telling what it's going to be. Yeah, I mean, there's no telling, but the cold at least hasn't set in by yet. It could be rain, and there's no controlling that. But at least it's early enough on the calendar where the temperature should be warm.
I will say, as you're talking about this reminds me, 2011 was the last, big time ACC game at Lane Stadium, and it was against Clemson. And it was October 1st, and it was like 36 degrees of raining. So I just jinxed it.
Well, I guess I'd like to think it would be earlier. I mean, with not having Notre Dame this year, I mean, that always throws the schedule off when you have Notre Dame in there, because it's always just random time they have open. So I know they got the 4 straight non-conference games to open the season. So I mean, that was the earliest they could have it, was September 30th. That weekend.
Clemson.
I like it being that
competitively. Yeah, I mean, it's a great weekend in terms of atmosphere and recruiting and all that. But Virginia Tech should be 3-1 or 4-0, depending on what happens against West Virginia. So, I mean, I think that's a good opportunity. Clemson will obviously have a lot of buzz being a national title winner. But they lost a lot, and Watson and Gallman and Williams and all those guys left, so they'll be replacing guys just like Virginia Tech is replacing guys. And I think after 4 games or so I don't know if they have a bye week before they play Tech, but I think both teams will kind of be figuring out who they are, and that should be a fun one.
Yeah, I like when the open spot is. I think I saw you pointed out on the board. It's exactly, in the middle of the season, 6 before, 6 after. I mean, I think it's pretty tough if they're going to have 3 out of their final 4 on the road.
Yeah, I mean, that last stretch, starting with, where does it go? It goes Carolina, Duke, Miami, Georgia Tech,
Pittsburgh,
Pitt, and UVA. That's the coastal division right there. So, I mean, those are going to be huge. And, I think going to Miami and going to Atlanta to play Georgia Tech in November. Georgia Tech's the only team that kind of knows what they're doing at quarterback besides Duke. So, if Georgia Tech's into it, Georgia Tech's decent next year, I mean, they'll get up for a visit from Virginia Tech. So, when Bobby Dodd is full, that's a tough place to play. And obviously, Miami, who knows if they're going to be good? They could be 6-4 and kind of meddling around like they've been the last couple of years, or they could be 8-2 under Mark Richt, and that could be a huge game. So, but yeah, when you're going Georgia, Miami, Georgia Tech, Pitt, there in early November, I think that's going to be the crucial stretch. Yeah, I mean,
it's a challenging schedule, but not an overwhelming schedule. So I like the kind of the mix, and you get a couple league games, Clemson, West Virginia, and North Carolina, and I think it's always just kind of good, at least for planning purposes, to kind of have it laid out. So, Doug, let's finish up with basketball, man. We're I guess almost a month now into the season, at least for the ACC season. It's been a tough go. ACC, I don't know. For me, again, this is another one of those you've probably been following it closer for longer than I have, Doug, but I can't remember this being such a deep, deep conference. I mean, really, you could any team could win any game.
It seems, Louisville absolutely stomped Pittsburgh tonight. And Pittsburgh beat UVA, and Florida State beat UVA, and NC State beat Duke last night. And I think you're starting to see kind of the tiers of the league separate. I mean, I think Notre Dame and UVA and North Carolina and Florida State are probably the upper echelon. I mean, Duke's struggling now, but I mean, they're still 15-5, and they're still Dukes, so they'll probably figure it out by the end of the year. And I think there's a big glut of teams kind of duking it out. Pardon my pun there. 6 to 10, 6 to 11, and I think you gotta fight to get into that top 8 to really feel good about yourself. I think 9, 10, 11, 12 are going to be firmly on the bubble, just after everybody's done beating up on each other.
Well, and look at UVA won at Notre Dame tonight. I mean, I wouldn't say they didn't stomp them as bad as Louisville beat Pitt, but I mean, Notre Dame was the last unbeaten.
Yeah, you
can
never.
Lost 2 in a row.
Night to night, you never. Yeah, I mean, night to night. I mean, they lost 2 out of 3, but they played Florida State, and Florida State is insanely good, and UVA. So, I mean, night to night, who knows? Virginia Tech plays Carolina on Thursday, and I mean, Carolina's obviously the favorite, extremely talented. But if we've learned anything already, it's that it doesn't really matter what's been happening before. It's all about the one game in front of you, and then just hoping to survive it, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a pretty tough stretch. I guess I've been kind of pointing to this stretch coming, or that they're in right now, for quite a while. I mean, Virginia Tech has won 2 in a row. They beat Georgia Tech at home. They won a really tough one at Clemson on Sunday.
Those were the 2 games that they had to have, because Georgia Tech and Clemson are
right.
I talked about 6 to 11. Georgia Tech and Clemson are probably 12, 13, 14.
So they get those two. And the Clemson one, to me, I mean, what showed me a lot, I mean, Seth Allen had that big shot with about 30 seconds to go, but I was impressed that they hit all 6 of their free throws in the last 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And that, because they haven't always done that this season.
Yeah, and on the road, I mean, that's the one thing that I won't say they proved themselves. You know, Clemson's a decent team, but not great. But, I mean, after getting stomped against NC State and stomped against Florida State, yeah, I mean, to go on the road and kind of take Clemson's best punch over and over again. And, I mean, Clemson went up 62-60 there on that dunk, and it was kind of was like, well, you know, looks like Clemson's grabbing control. But, I mean, that's where having guys like Allen and Leday and Bibbs who have played just a ton of minutes, and particularly the last 3 years, and, you know, that's kind of where it comes through. And to be able to, you know, go toe-to-toe and squeak out a win and make those free throws and make those plays at the end of the game, I mean, I think that's got to be a big confidence booster for them after they basically can make any play against NC State or Florida State.
So I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, Doug, but how much of a chance do you give Virginia Tech at UNC tomorrow?
UNC is incredibly talented, and they have what will destroy Virginia Tech, what can destroy Virginia Tech, which is just the size on the glass, and just being able to have 2 or 3 possessions basically on one trip down the floor. But I mean, Virginia Tech's competed. You know, Notre Dame's kind of the same way, and Tech hung with them. So we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised either way if Virginia Tech got blown out or hung around. I mean, they could come out and shoot lights out. I mean, the 2 games that they've really looked really good in were, you know, I thought Duke and Clemson, and they just came out and played just awesome offensive basketball. So if that happens, they can beat anybody. So we'll see. I don't know. North Carolina's real good.
Yeah. I would.
But then it's ACC, so you never know.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a really.
They lost to Georgia Tech, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they've lost, and I mean, it's just there's just so much parity this year. I mean, it's going to. I don't know. It's really hard to separate. I mean, yeah, Florida State is up there, and Carolina is too. But I mean, it's really a lot more muddied this year than I think it has been in a lot of other years. But Doug, let's send it out here in a positive, man. Let's you got any shout out for us this week?
Shout out. Shout out to the Atlanta Falcons for making the Super Bowl finally.
There you go.
You know, that's big stuff. You know, I will say I was a stronger Falcons fan back in the day. Not as diehard now as I, you know, might have been during the Michael Vick era, but you know, it's good to see a team that you keep an eye on go to the Super Bowl.
Well, I hope to one day shout out my Cincinnati Bengals. I know it hasn't happened and probably won't for quite a while, but I hope to one day, if I'm lucky. I mean, for me, I have to give the shout out to Virginia Tech recruiting. I mean, that's just, it's such a huge role they're on right now, and I mean, they're gonna finish really strong. I mean, they're not gonna get all of the targets, obviously, but pretty good crop fill out these last, I guess, 3 or 4 spots. It should give the class about 30. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to stretch the numbers that much, but they can to get. It's looking like 30 is going to be that number they're going to hit. So it's an unreal job. I mean, it's really going to be interesting to see how they follow up with this in 2018, 2019, because they're looking really, really good again for a lot of other top guys. So. But Doug, I guess that'll wrap things up. I hope we can get Skip back on here next week right before signing day. And, you know, I don't know. He may have some scoop on our guy, Mekhi Becton. He's actually going to announce on National Signing Day. So you never know. I don't know. Hopefully Skip won't be holding out on us next week.
Yeah, you never know. He's always he's a little gun shy with it. Yeah.
Well, I guess the good thing is you're not gun shy, Doug.
No, I think they made a pretty strong impression on old Mackay this week.
Well, if he's listening to iHeartRadio and listens to us, then I think he'll really he'll know
he'll get a loyal listener. Mackay Beckham, loyal listener.
I don't know. I mean, we'll have to ask Skip. I mean, I don't know if he listens to iHeart or not, but I mean, his mentor Skip Hopkins is on here, from time to time. So,
and he's probably met Whit, and I'm sure Whit brought it back this weekend.
Yeah, that's right. Loyal listener Whit Babcock.
Yeah, we just had to shout him out one more time.
We have to. Honestly, we should give a shout out to Whit like every podcast. I think we do, but if there's ever
I try and sneak him in.
Right, yeah. Very, very discreetly, Doug. Very discreetly.
Yeah.
Well, like I mentioned, we're a week away from signing day. We got tons coming on signing day, but I expect them. They're going to get at least one more commitment before then. We'll be waiting on a couple of guys on signing day, but we'll have to kind of wait and see how this next week plays out. So we'll be following every step of the way with all these guys. We've got a great team of analysts that are on top of everything going on with all these guys. So for Doug Bowman, Jason Stamm, thank you for listening to this week's edition of the VTZone.com Scoutcast, and we'll see you back here next week.